Greetings and salutations. So good to be with you all one more time. I am Jay Gideon Winfrey, licensed therapist, and this is another episode of Sound Mind. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you for the blessings. Thank you for the feedback. It has been a tremendous blessing to work and walk with you all up until this point, and to see God continue to do what he does in our lives individually and collectively. As you see, we're in a little different background today because we are introducing what the set will look like for season 6. So thank you so much for the support. Obviously, they're going to keep me around for another season. So thank you all so much for your support and for the blessings. So we wanted to just give you all kind of a peek into what we're going to be doing in season 6 and how different it's going to look, because there's so much that we have that we're going to be doing, so much we're going to be continuing to talk about regarding sound mind and sound doctrine. So let's go ahead and jump in for today. Now, I'm excited about this one today because this one is something that the Lord really convicted me from a sense of utilizing psycho-spiritual integration. And today what we're going to talk about is the psychology of taking up your bed and walking. Again, the psychology of taking up your bed and walking. Now, we're going to use, as we always do with Sound Mind, we're going to use the sacred backdrop, and we're going to transfer it into the secular. That's what we do here at Sound Minds. We believe in blending the two because, like we say all the time at Sound Mind, we want to have conversation that's going to lead to conviction, because once we have conviction, then we're going to have conversion. And that's what we're about, conversion and change, and making sure that we actually have the tools to improve the quality of life in our relationships in every aspect possible, okay? So let's set the backdrop here. So let's go to our New Testament textbook. And we're going to go to John 5, 1 through 15. Now, this is one of the many miracles that Jesus performed, but this one just really stands out because there's such a psychology here when you look at this particular miracle that Jesus performed. Now, most of us, even if we're not constant attendees of church, you all know about the man literally who took up his bed and walked, but there was such clinical relevance in that I just had to pull it out for our Sound Mind family. So I want to go through that and just show you the psychology of taking up your bed and walk, okay? So the backstory is this. There's a big Jewish festival that goes on, so there was a lot of people that was there, okay? And at this particular Jewish festival, there was this body of water that people believed that if they could get to the water, they would be healed. Well, there was an individual that had spent 38 years laying on his bed, or 38 years on his mat, okay? And the interesting thing that I saw as I was reading the scripture and how it translated into sound doctrine as far as the clinical approach and therapeutic approach is that when they identified the individuals who came to this particular pool, it was 4 types of individuals. And I want to talk about those 4 types of individuals because these are individuals that we are and also individuals that we see. So as I identify these 4 types of individuals that were at this pool, I want us to be able to think about not just people in our lives, but then asking ourselves the question, being honest and transparent, is this one of the dynamics that I deal with as an individual? Because it's not just about projecting criticism or insight regarding other people, but we also want to look at ourselves because the best work we can do is self-work, okay? So the 4 types of individuals that were at this particular pool waiting to be healed, the first type of individual was the disabled individual. And I got my notepad here because I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything, so I'm going to pick it up to just make certain that I give you all the details that I was given because I want to give it to you in its authenticity. So the first type of person that was identified, as I said, was the disabled individual, okay? When we talk about the disabled individual, we're talking about individuals who are unable to use what they have because they once had it or never had it. Think about that when we think about being disabled. Disabled can come in a lot of different ways emotionally and spiritually. It could be because of an experience, something happened, and all of a sudden that love and that care and that compassion that we had, all of a sudden we lose it because now we're emotionally disabled. Or what if we were in an environment where we never had the opportunity to learn it, so therefore we never had it. So there's a disabling that happens. So that was the first individual that was there, was the disabled individual. So let's ask ourselves the question, am I disabled in some way, shape, or form? How is my compassion? How is my consideration? How is my attitude? Did I once have a pleasant attitude, and because something happened, some accident, something that I wasn't necessarily looking forward to, but life happened and all of a sudden I lost it. I became disabled. Or what kind of environment have I been in since my time on this earth? Was I in an environment where it was nurtured? Did I see it? Was it demonstrated? Did I never have it at all and I'm disabled from that capacity? The beautiful thing and the blessing about being disabled is this. When you're disabled, we all have a law that we know about in our government, the American with Disabilities Act. And what the American with Disabilities Act says is that accommodations have to be made to give people who are disabled the same access as everyone else. That's where our faith comes in at. That's where our compassion for others comes in. Basically, what we're saying is no matter what your disability, you still have a right to have accessibility to the things that are going to give you that balanced life. So there still is a way for healing to take place if you recognize what your disability is. But the second individual that was also at the pool was the individual that was blind. So by definition, what we have for blind is they're unable to see because they were either born that way or something made them that way. So it sounds a lot like disabled because when we talk about blind, we're talking about the inability to see, okay? Now, sometimes we have the inability to see the good around us because we hadn't saw a lot of it growing up. We were in negative situations and circumstances, negative relationships, so it makes it very difficult to see the good around us. So we can be emotionally and spiritually blind. And because of that, it's difficult to get the joy of life because you don't see it. And again, it could be because of something that you never was exposed to or something that at one time you lost it. It could have been a strained relationship with the family member. It could be that one relationship or engagement or marriage that fell through. It could even be a pregnancy that didn't come to fruition. So many things can turn us blind to where we no longer see the things in life that are lovely and all of the blessings that we have. So therefore it gives us a negative overtone with our life and a negative overtone in regards to our future endeavors. So let's ask ourselves the question, has something happened in my life that I just can't see the good things around me? I just have a hard time perceiving things as being positive. I just have literally became blind to blessings and blind to positivity.
Why do you think these men don't want to get married?
It really depends on an individual's why for getting married. A lot of the things that make a man good are kind of intangible. And his credit score shouldn't be the metric for what makes him good.
Now, there's a third individual that was also there. It was also the lame individual. The lame individual is the person that walks with an impairment. Now, from a psychological or sociologically speaking regard, the lame individual is a little different because they walk but with an impairment, meaning that they're still moving, but it's with a slight disadvantage. It's something that makes the walk different. So this can be in a positive or in a negative sense, because the good thing about being lame is that you're still moving and you still have the ability to move. It's just a matter of how you look at your impairment. So a lame individual has the ability to move, improves to be able to move. It just depends on how limiting they allow their impairment to be in their lives. So that has a lot to do with how we look at our life direction, how we handle situations. It's almost like having the person that makes the effort, but then the first time something happens, all of a sudden there's an impairment, there's a barrier, there's an excuse. So an impairment can be something like a scar mentally or a scar physically that's happened to us. So if the individual can identify as being lame, then in that instance, what we're saying is this is a person that has the ability and has demonstrated the ability to move. Now, personally, I think the lame person has a slight advantage because they've demonstrated the ability to move, but then also there's a different accountability because you can move. So in spite of what's happening in our lives, in spite of the disappointments that we've had, we have proven movement. And if we tap into the fact that we have proven movement, then it means that we can still move forward in spite of the impairment. Now, the last individual that was listed there is the paralyzed individual. And the paralyzed individual is unable to use functions because of an injury or a disconnection. When we think about being paralyzed, we think about unfortunate accidents that occur where one day somebody's walking, then all of a sudden it could be a car accident, it could be a fall, it could be so many things that can happen, and then all of a sudden the ability to move is no longer there. It's complete loss of function. So sometimes in life we experience situations where we have paralysis. It could be, again, the death of a loved one. It could be a breakup. It could be disappointments. To all of a sudden we're paralyzed, we're disconnected. So because of that, we have these 4 different individuals that were identified that was at this healing pool waiting to be healed and waiting for the opportunity. Now, our main character, the gentleman that was 38 years laying on his bed, he's an interesting individual because I think that we can see a little bit of ourselves in that individual. The interesting thing was he had laid on his mat for 38 years. So the question that I want to pose today on Sound Mind is, how many years have we allowed to go by and us be in a state where we make excuses? When we speak of the things we didn't have, when we have that victim's mentality. Because this gentleman had been laying there for 38 years, and when he was trying to make the attempt to get to the pool to get healed, he said, well, everybody else has help. I can't do this and I can't do that. So for 38 years, he stayed there. Now, this is a beautiful story because it really speaks to the sentiment of what our connection is to Christ and what our commitment is to our own well-being. Because what I found interesting was that Christ himself came to this gathering. He came to a gathering that was a major Jewish festival, so there was going to be a big audience there. And so watching this man make these excuses, Christ being who he is, he asked the question that I would ask as a therapist: do you want to be well? That's critical when you're talking about making any kind of movement in your life, because there's a declaration and then there's a proclamation. See, our declaration is just when we announce it to ourselves that we want to do better. But our proclamation is what we do when we show the world that we're going to get better. So you have to see the differences in that. It's not just a matter of thinking it. It's not just a matter of saying it, but it's proclaiming it. It's standing on it. So when Jesus asked the man, do you want to get well? And the man responded, yes. And then Jesus said, take up your bed and walk. Now, what's amazing with this is that he was giving the man an instruction. He was giving the man an alternative, okay? Now, that's something that I do as a clinical practitioner, is that oftentimes with my population, I have to give them an instruction that really gives them the authorization to understand that you do have an option to not be in the place and to be in the state that you're in, that you do have a consideration that really matters. And oftentimes, all it takes is just reminding people that they have the ability and the power and that they're present in spite of what's happened. So basically, it's a therapeutic version of the American with Disabilities Act, basically saying that if you choose, there's an accommodation that can be made regardless of whatever state you've been in prior to this particular situation. And that was what Christ did in that account, was he was giving the man an alternative in spite of his circumstances and situations. So the evidence of his movement was literally, at that point, he got up. But here was the thing that made it so interesting. The question was asked to me, well, why did Jesus tell him to take up his bed and walk? He could have just left the bed there. But the psychology behind that is this. Whatever it is that we've been through in our life, whatever it is that we've gone through, it's the very thing that we show the world that we are living, breathing examples of faith and being in relationship with God. Because God is a relational God. Anything that we want and anything that we're wanting him to do in our lives, it's a matter of our engagement. And this is what I tell my patient population. I tell my patient population that your treatment is only as impactful as your truth. If you are limited in what you tell me in your truth, then your treatment will be limited in its effectiveness. But in accepting whatever the journey has been, I literally, as a therapist, tell them, take up your bed and walk. Meaning that you go throughout the world without any shame, without hanging your head, to let the world know that in spite of, I'm here. By God's grace, I'm here because I made a decision to walk and to be able to move past whatever my disability is, whatever my past has been.
Every discipline starts with creating a habit. Find a plan that works for you. I know you can put a reminder in your phone, call so-and-so in 30 days. You can't use the excuse that, I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. You know, stuff people like to say. Nah, if you're not outgoing, right, you better get going because that's the only way networking works.
Julia, are you ready to play band with us? I'm gonna play my clarinet.
And Elmo's gonna play his drum. Drum loud.
Oh, well, you know what to do, Julia.
Julia knows.
With Julia's autism, loud sounds can be too much.
But she still loves to make music. Play band.
Early screening for autism can make a lifetime of difference. Find out more at screenforautism.org.
So the interesting thing about the next phase of the story in the psychology of taking up your bed and walk is that it happened on a day that nobody was supposed to have their bed. So what was ironic was there was a group of individuals that as soon as they saw the man walking with his bed, with his mat, the first thing they did was tell him what the law said. In other words, you're not supposed to be walking around with your bed, with your mat. So what that said is that what that said to me was that oftentimes the minute that you want to make improvement, what you can count on is people reminding you of what you're not supposed to be doing, that you don't look like what it is you've been through. And because of that, people like to remind you of what your past is. That's how you always know that you're making progress, is because when people remind you of where you used to be, it's an indication that they see that you're going somewhere. So keep that philosophy in mind when you're talking about taking up your bed and walking, that people will remind you of that, but that's okay. And then they asked the gentleman, well, who told you that you can walk around with your bed, particularly on the Sabbath day? So they were quoting law to him. His answer was, well, the man who did it told me that I could. And so now he was given a testimony about what Jesus had done for him, and then that sparked a conversation about who Jesus was. So when we look at blending the sacred and the secular in that aspect, then what ends up happening is this. You end up seeing that your treatment is really a matter of testimony, because you're going to talk to people about how you at one time you were lame, how you were blind, how you were paralyzed, and how you had a slight impairment in your walk. But because you're living evidence and you're carrying that with you, no longer laying in it but walking with it, it gives you the faith to be able to continue and to move forward in your own life and be a testimony to other people. So that's the beauty about understanding the psychology of taking up your bed and walking. And in that, the way that the story concludes is that Jesus had told the man to go to the temple. And ironically, when Jesus healed him, he disappeared. He disappeared. Nobody could find him, but he met him at the temple. And when he met him at the temple, he said to the man something that's very profound that I say clinically. He told the man that whatever you did, now that you've been healed, don't do it anymore. So whatever contributes to our situation, once we take responsibility, once we take ownership, and once we literally take up our bed and walk, whatever led to that means that we have to disassociate ourselves with individuals, with people, and do what I often say is press the entire reset button on our lives. And once you press the reset button on your life, it gives you the opportunity to assess every single relationship, and you have to put it in one of two categories, either assets or liabilities. So what I challenge you today, as you look at the psychology of taking up your bed and walk, identify one of those 4 areas of impairment, see where it fits for you, but then also take an assessment of your immediate circle, take an assessment of your family. And then at that point, go through the process of taking ownership and then being able to see that literally your healing and your growth and your manifestation is really in just your decision to be obedient, to get the help that you need. If it's going to a therapist, if it's becoming a member of a self-help group, whatever it is that you need, so that you're not isolated and making excuses for 38 years. Now keep in mind, this man had laid there for 38 years. And I think what's even more sad is the fact that people watched him suffer for 38 years. And nobody decided to help him. Nobody had anything to say until he got up to walk. So sometimes when we start doing well, when your psychology and your mentality starts to become more fruitful, that's when you're going to hear people start to say things that become critical. And the first thing that I often hear my patients come back and tell me as they start to make their improvement is that they get discouraged because now everybody has something to say because now that they're doing better. Well, that's just confirmation that you're doing just that. You're doing better. So some things can be expected when you look at progress, because if you're not progressing, then there's not anything to be said, there's not anything to be discussed in that dynamic. So the last thing Jesus told him was, whatever it is that you did before, don't do it again. Because that way, we don't have to look at being in those repetitive patterns. And a lot of times, our mentality, our relationships, we end up in patterns. I have a lot of people that come to me that say that they recognize they have the same dating patterns. Well, you have to break the pattern. Because if you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to always get what you've always gotten. So you have to be mindful of that and be very, very astute and then very transparent with yourself in those particular dynamic when it comes to taking up your bed and walking, okay? So I hope that you're able to break that down and be able to apply it, because y'all know how I feel about you, how much I love you, and how I really want the change to occur in your life based upon what it is that God has entrusted to me in this walking in this journey. So again, be honest and transparent with yourself, take ownership, and continue to do the things that are going to elevate you. First and foremost, take it to God in prayer. Take it to God in prayer, and then whatever resources that you need, a therapist, a coach, being a part of a group, whatever it is, take up your bed and walk, because you're responsible for the state and place that you're in. Discipleship is about movement. When you look at the history of the disciples that followed Christ, and even after Christ left, all the disciples went out, and that's what God calls us to do, is to go out into the world and make individuals believers and to cast our net to be fishers of men. Well, that requires movement. So it's difficult to say that you love God and that you're faithful to anything if there's not movement. Even in your relationships, if you love someone, love is a verb, it's not a noun. It's an action. So the whole psychology of taking up your bed and walking requires action. So I hope that you all got plenty out of it. Thank you all for the support. We continue to work hard here at Sound Mind to make certain that you're getting what it is that you need, and to make sure that your life is in alignment with what it is that you're wanting and desiring. So tune in next week, and we'll have another great episode. And remember, as we always say here at Sound Mind, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May he turn his love and smile and countenance towards you, blessing you in your going outs and your coming ins. And may he give you shalom peace. May you be at peace with God. May you be at peace with yourself. And may you be at peace with others. I'm Jay Gideon Winfrey, licensed therapist. This has been another episode of Sound Mind. And remember, utilize your theology to influence your psychology, because sound doctrine leads to a sound mind. Take care. I love y'all. We'll see you next time.
Today, we're going to be making some key lime cupcakes.